This morning's text found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 17, verses 11 through 19, is a wonderful story about healing. We see Jesus' love in action, but more importantly, I think we're given a lesson about our own call, both as individuals and as a church, to be agents of healing. There are several things we can take from the story about what it means to be agents of healing. But as always, I think it's important to familiarize ourselves with the story's context. As the story opens, we find 10 lepers approaching Jesus. They're crying out, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." And although we may have our image of what a leper looks like today, the word leper was used within ancient times for anyone with any kind of skin condition. It could be as horrific as the disease we know today as leprosy or Hansen's disease, a bacterial infection which causes permanent damage to the skin, nerves, limbs, and eyes, or it could be as mild as a case of eczema. If a person was suspected of having this skin condition, they had to present themselves to the priest who gave the final diagnosis. And if they were unfortunate enough to be diagnosed with leprosy, they were shunned by the community. They were required to wear tattered clothing. They weren't allowed to groom themselves at all. They had to live on the outskirts of town, far away from any human contact. And if they encountered anyone, they were required to announce themselves by crying out, "Unclean, unclean." And if the condition cleared up, then they had to once again present themselves to the priest and go through an elaborate religious ritual that lasted more than a week, and which included guilt and sin sacrifices, since obviously guilt and sin was the cause of their condition in the first place. And so with that as background, let's once again look at this morning's gospel story. And so right away we see the 10 lepers are already breaking the rules. They didn't announce themselves as unclean, but rather cried out to Jesus for mercy. Desperation had turned them into rule breakers. And lucky for them, Jesus seemed to be particularly partial to both the desperate and the rule breakers. He was drawn to the humanity of each person, not their superficial details. Jesus didn't do a background check before participating in their healing. He didn't look into their immigration status or religion, or he would have surely discovered that one of them, the Samaritan, was a potential terrorist. He didn't notice if any of them walked with a bit of a swish or spoke with unusually animated hand gestures. Jesus didn't ask for a blood test, and he didn't concern himself with the fact that one or two of them seemed to have residue of polish on their fingernails left over from the night before. Jesus' love was indiscriminate, and so was the healing in this morning's story. Quite frankly, the Christian church has done an awful job in this area, and it's up to us to change that. You and I and MCC churches around the world, I believe we are called to the business of indiscriminate healing. The next thing that's worth noting about the healing process, healing of these 10 lepers, is their own role in the process. When they cried out to Jesus for mercy, he didn't wave his hands and say, "Poof, you're healed." In fact, the healing didn't even happen until they took part in the process by obeying his instruction to present themselves to the priests. It took an act of faith on the part of the lepers to obey him, because they had no reason to return to the priest until healing had taken place. But our text points out that the healing actually took place as they went. We often approach God and want a cure for what ails us, but aren't so willing to do anything. It's as if all we have to do is put in our order and expect the heavenly server to come to our table with it. But God reminds us that if we're eating from God's dining table, we have to get up and serve ourselves. And if we're going to be agents of healing, we have to remember that we can't fix anyone. We don't have a magic wand. That's not our job. Our job is to support and affirm our sisters and brothers in their own healing process. Our job is to pray for them during the process and rejoice with them along the way.